Thank you, Jonathan. Now, I've been given 30 minutes, and today is obviously a really packed day for you. People are throwing things at you at high speed, so I'll continue in that tradition. I know you've just eaten something, so if you want to catch me later or send me an email about something that you want to follow up on or didn't make sense, or if you think I'm saying something crazy, that's fine. You can yell out. So here goes. We'll just do it pretty quickly. So because of the time frame. So what I wanted to talk about is three key dimensions of marketing, because we're not going to go into all of the depth here. When it comes to entering a new market, whether it's home care services, whether it's any other area or service area, there are three key things, I think, from a new entrant point of view to think about it. Particularly when you're starting out in a new space, even if you're already delivering lots of aged care services, this is a different world when you're delivering services inside people's homes. So to start off, defining your niche market is really important. Secondly, finding what that difference is, and then third, promoting like a gorilla, spelt like that. I had to spell check that for some reason. So when we think about niche and we think about starting out, we have to recognise that small is okay. In the social sector, there's a lot of fear about the notion that the giant gorillas are going to take over and all the small organisations are going to be crushed. Now, in some areas where volume is really important, then that is going to be a pressure. But not every need can be plugged into a kind of a volume model. So small organisations that are thinking about themselves from a niche point of view, I think, have an opportunity to meet needs and grow and win customers. So if we think about the new, you might not be a new organisation, but if we're thinking about the home care space itself, imagine that you're a new organisation. Let's think about a few questions. Again, I'll just run through these. We won't answer them in detail, but then I'll focus on these three areas later. First, where are your clients going to come from? Are they going to be from a completely new space? Are they going to be new to you? Are they going to be new people entering into the aged care space? Because we know there's a pretty high turnover every few years, so there's a lot of new people coming in. Or are you going to win from others who are out there? And you may need to think about not just winning the new people, but winning from others as well. So that competitive element comes in. So as you're pulling on the rope in the tug of war, there's somebody pulling on the other side. Otherwise, it would be too easy. Also, where are these new opportunities? So you will know when you look at the market, there are already players in there. There are already players who are established. They've already got people. They're just going to flip over into the new packages. The question is, where are those new opportunities as well? So to compete directly against an organisation that has a client that is going to become a customer and they're embedded strongly with them is a really tough thing to do. So where are the new opportunities? And part of this process is to define your market. So doing the market research, even if you think you know who these people are, and assume you don't know what their needs are. We also need to think about, in terms of finding new opportunities, underserved populations, so populations that aren't actually getting as much service as they would otherwise need, poorly served ones where in your area or a particular needs state are not well served by the existing incumbents, and gaps in service quality. So looking for these gaps in places where the service level is not there, and these can be great spaces for opportunity. And you can also be thinking about niche or specialist needs. That second question is it worth it? So if you think about your niche market, is it worth going after that niche market? Is the size big enough? If there are only going to be 100 potential clients in that, and you know you need 500 in order to survive in this space, then that's not big enough. So the size, the potential financial opportunity needs to be important. You also, as a new entrant into this space, need to be stronger on differentiation than existing organisations. So new product, new features, new style, new approach, things that differentiate you from others. And we'll talk about that in a sec. Better, faster, cheaper. What is the dimension that you can leverage off? And thirdly, promoting with that guerrilla-style approach to breakthrough, because breaking through in a noisy space where there's lots of messages is a hard thing to do well. So, defining our niche market. before we get on, marketing, the simplest definition that I know of is marketing is understanding needs and moving to meet them. And if that's not a definition that appeals to people in the social sector, I don't know what is. That's basically what marketing is. It's no, clever or evil thing that we often think it might be in terms of the sales process. It's really just about really understanding needs and what are all the ways that we can move to meet those needs. And if we think about marketing, our niche market strategy is figuring out what segments, what areas, what geographic focus we can zoom in on, and then plan our marketing. And it's a series of activities. So when we do our marketing program with YouLead, we have a whole series of pieces around the strategy, how we define it, how we define our markets, how we understand what the acquisition process is. And then once you're clear about all of those, you can then start to think about your marketing tactics. So don't just jump straight to, what does the ad look like approach. We need to really think cleverly about our niche market strategy beforehand. And if we think about the world of marketing, all of these dimensions are relevant to aged care organisations. Again, in the past, if we worked in social sector and really the money comes from grants, it's not something that's necessarily been as high priority except for potentially in fundraising. How we segment, how we have a growth strategy, how we do retention, how we think about distribution, the packaging. All these things are important. Again, we're not going to go through all of them in half an hour, obviously. We could just read it, but that's probably not that useful. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the things you need to wrap around in your marketing function. So if we think about the need for niche strategy, strategy is about making choices and trade-offs. It's about choosing to focus on one thing rather than another. And so when you're thinking about a niche market strategy, you're absolutely being laser-like in your focus. You can't do everything. You can't get everybody. You can't be a generic aged care provider that everybody will think is great unless you've got, you've sewn up one particular geographic area. So particularly if you're small in this market, even if you're large in other markets, your focus has to be laser-like. So how do we think about defining niches? Really, it's about a segment of the overall market, or it's saying this is what my market is. So if we think, and these are examples, by the way, this is to illustrate a point about ways that we can slice the market. A series of needs or a series of different groups. So there's a series of different people who live locally, people with special needs, etc. There's all sorts of ways to slice up that group of people, and there's also ways to slice up what the needs are that they have. Now, if we think about our niche, overall there are two basic approaches you can take. You can say we are going to focus on delivering many things for a small group of people. So this is the typical approach in the social sector where we have a local area and we know the local people. We're essentially wanting to do everything for those people locally. So that's this example. And when it comes to home care, we'll do daily needs, food, cleaning, medicals, whatever. We'll do it all because we're the only people in remote areas. This is often the right strategy. But we can also think about a kind of a skill or service niche rather than just saying it's a geography niche. And we might say, actually, we're going to focus on being the best case manager and we're going to sell our case management services to everybody else. Whether or not people want to buy case management in the new world is an open question, but there are all sorts of skills that we might be able to sell to other organisations or just become a specialist in one area, because the ultimate possibility is that people can then choose you because you're the best in that. And really, in order to differentiate in a market, being the best at a thing that you can own is by far the strongest strategy in a competitive market. Or if you're really, really zooming down, you might focus on a sub-segment. For example, the food and cleaning needs of sub-Saharan Africans living locally who are over 80 years old, like a very specific segment, depending on where you're living. So in terms of choosing your niche, you need to be thinking about the people you're serving, the needs they meet, where the geography is, what the service area, and whether you're going that horizontal or vertical along the markets. In terms of finding your difference, the key here is differentiation is, in my view, the key to unlock powerful marketing. If you don't have an idea of why you should be chosen over others, some twist, some feature, some style, some history, something that's inside the organisation that you can use to differentiate yourselves from others, then when it comes to a competitive environment, it's really hard to stand out. And people will be choosing based on all sorts of different criteria, and you may have to choose a cluster of those criteria that can help you really drive into a more competitive market. So there are plenty of people selling hand lotions and whatever else the Body Shop sells before the Body Shop came along. In order to enter this new market, they had to have a real strong point of difference. It was one that had a heart and a social conscience to it, but from a marketing point of view, it was the point of difference that enabled them to break into a very crowded retail market. A Cleveland Clinic, have a look at this if you haven't looked at this in terms of the medical model in the US, specialising only in heart care. And this is the trend for medicine in the US, where big insurers can send you, if you've got a liver problem or a heart problem, they don't want to send you to the local hospital, which is likely to have very poor outcomes relative to the best in the country. The best in the country is the Cleveland Clinic, and so it becomes a focused on, we only do heart. So, it's a focus on that service, but because it's a big country, that's a $12 billion organisation. It's easy to understand here, which is Power Shop entering in the crowded retail power market. Who would go into that market? Very crowded, big players in there already. The only way they could break in was a differentiation. It's a greener offer, but in addition to that, you choose. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I love it.
You love it. Yeah, exactly. It's clever because it basically says instead of just locking away the electricity, you buy it on a regular basis, and so you can buy it in advance, reduce your costs, manage it, etc. So again, a point of difference, a functional point of difference in terms of how they entered a crowded market. If you can do something of that level, then the odds of your marketing being powerful are very high. So what's your offering? How are people going to access it? How are they going to pay? What's the point of difference that's going to drive all of that for you? Critical question. And then promoting like a guerrilla. Well, if we think about the 5-minute version of how do we promote, now there's huge numbers of places to promote, ways of thinking about this, and we're not going to cover that obviously in the next few minutes, but having a budget and knowing that you're going to have a budget around marketing rather than just hoping that doing things for free is going to work for you is going to be important. Very, very high intensity marketing organisations, particularly when they start up, can in different industries can spend up to 25% of their income on marketing. Now that's too high for this sector, but we typically have been spending very little, maybe 1% in this space. So do you need to spend 5? Do you need to spend 8% when you're starting up? And understanding your client acquisition costs as the cost of acquiring that client, so you can understand how to set your costs. How do you drive brand awareness? Again, when you're new in a space, unless your brand is very well known in your community, how are you going to simply get over the first hurdle? Who the hell are you guys? And having that awareness function going on where, actually, I know that brand, the brand might need a refresh, make it a bit more attractive. What do you do? What are your credentials? So particularly early on, particularly when you're launching a new brand in a new market, you don't get too tricky with the communication. It's really who are you? What do you do? What are your credentials? Some of those basics. And then over time, you can start to add some twist to that. Absolutely do digital marketing. It's an obvious one. The power of using digital and search marketing. Search is obviously the key way that people find services now. And if your website comes up before the aged care website, then that's a strength in your particular area, and you can be very precise with it. And guerrilla marketing, particularly if you've got a local offer, is all about jumping in front of people in unusual places and ways and events and spaces that they might not otherwise think of. And particularly if you're not seen, if you don't have a visible presence, if you're going to spend on advertising, spending on outdoor in a local area can be an incredibly powerful thing, because it's where, if it's in the shopping strip of the local area, for example, people often respond to that. So we've talked about that, goals, getting the messages right. There's a lot of skills in this, but you can get into it and you can adjust as you go. And one campaign that I like that really illustrates the idea of powerful, simple communication is The Economist magazine out of the UK. And this is a kind of example of a guerrilla style communication. This is obviously at a pub and playing with the idea of the designated driver, and in this case be the designated thinker, and is on the little, coaster. So this idea of being in different places where people don't expect you is very powerful. And, fantastically powerful, simple advertising with great communication, very simple words. Everybody understands the Shakespearean quote, to be or not to be. So we know what they're saying simply by having the words to be up there. Trump, Donald, stuff like that. So in terms of finding you, PageRank, SEO, again, in the organisation, if you're established, you're already aware of these things. Driving that hard, spending some amount and start experimenting with AdWords. Make sure your analytics is very clear in terms of driving people to your website. Again, I can't go into a lot of detail there, but the My Aged Care website, making sure that you're on that, obviously, and people can find you, but also they'll find you directly as well. So you know that when somebody's just typing in aged care in my local area, there's going to be a few organisations popping up, and only a few. So how do you get in that space? And finally, as Jonathan was saying, we've been working on this ULead offering, which is just about how do we help people do some of these tasks in a way that takes you through it step by step. So we've been developing this online learning process with templates. I mean, I used to be a management consultant, so the way the management consultant might solve this question of defining your market, what are the frameworks you might use, some videos to help people work through it and do it in their own time. So I think if we think about how we're going to learn and move and be more nimble as we move on, the way that we think about training, the way we think about just-in-time learning is going to change as well. So that's what we're starting, just at the beginning, we're starting that process as well. So check that out.